H-U-L-L-C-I-T-Y. That's all we need.
Hello and welcome to a very special edition of the Tigers Down Under, joined by the boys from the To Hullenback podcast. So I'm your host, Alex, and with us we've got Ant. How are you, Ant?
I'm all right, mate. Are you?
Yeah, very good, very good. And we've also got Nathaniel. How are you?
I'm raring to go.
Absolutely. We've also got Will. How are you, Will?
When the coffee kicks in, I should be absolutely cracking.
Bright and early for you boys over there. We've also got our usual guests from Australia. We've got Dan. How are you, Dan?
First clean sheet for my local side today. So we're pretty happy with that.
Very good, very good. And we've also got Logan. How are you, Logan?
Yeah, Alex, doing well, mate. Still technical difficulties, but we're getting used to that. So I'm here and ready to go. Great to be here with the boys across the pond.
Absolutely. Well, look, let's get stuck into it. I'll sort of do a round table for each of these sections and we can talk broadly about them and then get stuck into our predictions. But maybe I'll start with you, Ant, and then we'll see who else has got thoughts on the summer incomings. We've got Delap joining from City on loan, Lakillo joining from Sparta Rotterdam, Vinagre joining on loan from Sporting, and rumoured by Baz a couple of weeks ago and now seemingly more certain or done with Aaron Connolly coming in on a permanent.
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing is with Delap is it's a wait and see, and it's one of those where we hope that he hits the ground running with us and the system, and Rosini can bring the best out of him, kind of thing. Because obviously he was at Stoke and Preston last season in this league, didn't really pull up any trees. I think got more yellow cards than he did goals, which obviously for a striker isn't brilliant. But
typical
like
Stoke.
You say, sometimes it just takes a certain club to just have it click for that player. So I'm hoping Delap's one of those. Lakila, I don't know much of. I've spoke to a Donny fan who didn't rate him when he was there, but he was there a few years ago now, and he's had a couple of good seasons abroad, so hopefully he's come back a more complete player. And Vinagre, I think, is probably the most exciting signing we've had since last summer, obviously with Seri, and he's up to that standard. He's a player who's got pedigree. He's won the league with Wolves before. He's played in the Premier League. He's playing at Sporting at the top league in Portugal. So, he's coming with class. If we can keep him fit, will be the I think biggest task we've got, because we've got no backup left backs other than Greavesy, and I don't think he wants to play left back this season. And Connolly's an interesting one, because I didn't actually think Rosini would go back in for him after his injury record last season. So if he's coming on a permanent and we can keep him fit, then it's a superb signing. But if we sign him on permanent and he's a bit of a sick note, then we've replaced one sick note with another. So we'll have to wait and see, won't we?
That's it. Yeah, I mean, Rosini's saying he wanted robust players, and we've brought in Connolly and Vinagre seemed to have a couple of injury issues with Everton. But as you say, it's interesting listening to a couple of other podcasts during the week talking about City having probably the most attacking fullbacks or wingbacks in the division when you pair up Christie with Vinagre. Nathaniel, what are your thoughts on the incomings?
Well, I don't think I'm 100% convinced by Delap and Lakilo, but that's because they're fairly young players, and that's sort of some of the players we've been signing. I wasn't convinced about Aaron Connolly, but then he showed that he was a perfect fit for the system. I think Vinagre, similar to Christie, as you said, could well be one of the best fullbacks in the league, and similar to Christie, he's already been promoted to the Premier League with Wolves before, so he's been there and done that. So I think he's definitely, I'm skipping ahead like an hour, but he's definitely the best signing of the three we've made so far. And Delap, obviously, from Man City, could turn out to be a great player. Pep rates him highly, but, I guess that's what loans are for, going to Stoke and Preston last season. Hopefully second year of professional football will be much better. But I think Vinagre is the standout.
Yeah, I think Vinagre certainly is the standout from that lot. I mean, Delap's the interesting one for me, as we've sort of said there with Ant and Nathaniel, with the young striker coming in. It's you sort of look at some of the players that were tearing up trees last season in the division, and I'm thinking of who was it Preston in the second half of the season. Was it Cannon from Everton? I would have liked to see him as one potentially coming in, but Delap's still young, showing a lot of promise as well with getting a couple of appearances for City. Can't be a slouch to be doing that. Will, what are your thoughts? I guess on those incomings, and then we can also sort of touch on the outgoings as well, which haven't been too many at this stage.
Yeah, well, Delap I think is an interesting one. Like I said, is well liked by Pep, and I think Stoke and Preston. I don't know much about their style of football, but I get the feeling, stereotypically, it's not the sort of football that would favour someone who's trained for years under a Man City sort of Pep Guardiola style, and that's something that Rossini is trying to get us to play like. So hopefully, that sort of football is exactly what Delap wants. Lakilo, like others have said, I don't actually know much about it. I've not really researched that much about him. I hope it looks interesting. It looks like could be a decent player. But Vinagre definitely is a fantastic signing for this level. He was superb when he was last here. So hopefully he still has the same. Hopefully he can keep fit. And Connolly was one where I was certain at the end of the season we were going to sign him, and then I was certain we weren't going to sign him. And now it's like, oh, well, he's turned up at the stadium to meet Liam, so he must be signing now. And I'm very happy with that because I think up front, I personally think he was Oscar's best attacking partner last season, but in the very few games he played. And he seemed to bring the best out of a lot of our attacking intent. So hopefully he can bring that back.
Yeah, I wonder if he did a bit of an Oda Wingy and just
turned up.
Yeah, just turned up and tried to get a deal done, which was quite funny. Everyone was sort of following because I think he tweeted out or had his Instagram story or something of the trip up to Hull. So that was a bit of a funny one. I also actually just wanted to get your views between you guys because you've probably seen a bit more of the preseason games than we have with Jarvis going out on loan to Shelbourne, because there was a bit of talk that he was actually one that could have come into the senior squad and potentially had dare I say, a better preseason than Longman, for example, and maybe taking. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry with that shocked look in your face, Nathaniel. But he's ended up going out on loan to the Irish club. So did that come as a surprise to you guys?
I think it's partly to do with the Connolly thing. I think he may not have gone out if Connolly hadn't been coming.
Yeah, and then obviously Tette's leaving as well, isn't he? And you thought maybe he'd take that spot, but like. The thing is with young players, especially players that show a lot of promise like Jarvis, you don't, as much as you want them to be involved in the first team, you've got Vaughan that's players on that side as well. And one or two of them, they're going to be sat on the bench, they're going to be making cameo appearances, cup appearances, and our luck in the cup, we usually go out in the first round, somebody 3 leagues below us. So, they're not going to get that many games if they stay here. And I would much rather them go on loan somewhere competitive and play week in, week out and develop that way than, make the odd appearance here. And then obviously they'll come back, they'll learn new things, they'll get better at certain aspects of the game and come to us a more complete player. That's the ideal situation for a loan, isn't it? So I'm okay with it. If he'd have stayed also, I would have been okay with it too.
Yeah, and he'll come back stronger for next season, maybe make him a better asset for the club, but you don't want to hamper his development this season, perhaps.
And actually, I think I saw the fact that the Irish League runs from March to November quirkily, so that he could actually come back in January and potentially be part of the squad for the second half if he has a good spell.
By the time we've had our 15 injuries.
Yeah, that's right. On to the Aussie boys then. I might start with you, Logan. On the outgoings, we've of course seen Callum Elder leave the club, join Derby on a permanent deal. We were talking just before the episode that sadly this is the first time in about 5 or 6 years that we don't have an Aussie at the club. Thoughts, I suppose, on Elder leaving and I guess Vinagre being the replacement for him?
Yeah, look, I think it's as you said, we bemoan the fact that there's an Aussie Tiger on his way, but it was one that kind of seemed like a formality for quite some time. I think there was rumours that Elder was going to be, moved on, and the fact that we signed Vinagre in his place is not exactly something to be sneezed at. So sad to see him go from some aspects, but I think that's certainly a player upgrade, and I think it just actually shows a huge amount of intent by the owner and the manager as well for Rossini to go and get a player of Vinagre's caliber and move Elder on, who he's a great player. He certainly can mix it at championship level, and certainly in the form of assists. He's a fullback that likes to get forward and offers, a lot. I think he'll do a great job at Derby, but can't say I'm too surprised in many ways.
Yeah, fair enough. And Dan, your thoughts as well on the players coming in, players going out, and how we're sort of sitting. I guess we're a week away from the season starting. Are you feeling like we might have done a bit more business by now, or sort of comfortable with how the squad's looking?
I think it's one of those things where there was so much talk about, we had a real big summer last year, and I think lots of talk about, we were going to shell out again, and we were going to bring in. It seemed like there's going to be lots and lots of upgrades, but which I don't actually hate that we didn't do that, because then it would have just felt like overhauling an overhaul. So I think Delap is, as the boys have said, an interesting one. He seems like he's been pretty sharp in the videos from preseason and training and stuff. So hopefully goes well for us. As with everyone else, Lakilo, I don't really know anything about.
You mean you haven't watched his YouTube goals compilation, and you're not an expert on his playing style?
Look, I don't have the best track record of judging people's careers based on YouTube highlight videos, so I just sort of stopped. Because I remember, I think before Ali signed, I watched something and I was like, this guy doesn't even look that quick. He doesn't even seem that impressive. And then he is he still needs to learn how to some composure in finishing. But so I just kind of stay away from them a bit now. So he's probably one that I'm intrigued to see how he goes. I'm hoping it doesn't turn out like Cynic, where it's someone that was brought in and seems to show a lot of promise abroad and then comes and doesn't really live up to any of that. I think the big one is the left back, because that was the big discussion point. That was an area, those wide defenders with the style of play we want to play, that we needed some real quality in those areas. So I think, yes, as Logan said, it's disappointing to have our Aussie in Elder depart, but as he also noted, it seems like a pretty good, replacement and upgrade. And I think generally we have like a reasonably a really solid squad, because you have good depth sort of across that whole 11. So apart from maybe goalkeeper at the moment, Lodge-Tatala has not had the best of pre-seasons, but he is really, really young still. So hopefully in that regard that Ingram just stays fit.
A brilliantly, perfectly set up segue there into talking about the preseason results, Dan. It's almost as if you've read the run sheet. I might. You could have gone with the just run with the look, but anyway, I might throw to the Poms again, if I can say that, just to give us a bit of an insight into how you saw the preseason games, because down here in Australia we haven't actually been able to watch any of the preseason streams and get too much of an insight into how the team is looking. I mean, we of course had that sort of breathless win over Galatasaray, the 4-3 result, where there potentially a couple of under 19 or under 20 Galatasaray players on the pitch at the end of that game to flatter the result. But undefeated, some people do like to fixate on the actual results of preseason games for whatever reason. But in terms of the performances, in terms of how we're sort of tracking towards that game against Norwich next weekend, how are you guys feeling out of those preseason games? Maybe start with And.
See, for me, friendlies are weird because the results don't matter whatsoever. But I think to some extent, especially towards the end of pre-season, you're going to want to see performances that instill some sort of confidence. Like for me, I'm looking at, have we improved in terms of putting the ball in the back of the net, finishing, creating chances, and have we eliminated the individual errors? And at the minute pre-season, it looks like we haven't. Barring the Galatasaray game, we still seem to struggle in front of goal, still missing absolute sitters, still errors at the back in regards to whether or not which player they're choosing to pass to when they're trying to play out from the back. And like we said, a couple of goalkeeper errors from Lodge-Tatala as well. So, but I mean, the thing is that they're automatically going to go into these games playing 50, 60% less than they normally would because they don't want to be injured. So how do you judge it? Because we might go to Norwich first game of the season and beat them 4-5-0. It's bizarre. I think it's important that they come out maybe unbeaten, just confidence wise. And a lot of the squad have had a lot of minutes. So, it's got to a point where, they can't really begrudge any of the game time that they've had in pre-season, because he's made sure that pretty much everybody in the squad's had the same, I think he said. So I think he's set us up for a good start to the season, hopefully.
Any concerns? I mean, there's been a couple of injuries picked up. We've got, is it Doherty's in a knee brace? Traore was sort of struggling for minutes early in pre-season at least. And I think was it Oscar and I want to say there was somebody else as well who picked up, was it Simmons?
Traore is injured as well.
Yeah, okay. Are there any sort of concerns? I mean, we're sort of seeing potentially similar signs to last season, or we're just sort of saying that they're probably just a couple of knocks and everyone should be right for the first game?
Well, I mean, hopefully they're fine. I think Doherty's the only long-term one, or like a few months. So hopefully they are just, week-long injuries and they can come back soon. But I think with the friendlies, perhaps the one today against Nantes is perhaps the most important, because the players should be fit enough to put a bit more effort in, perhaps. And, it's the very next game. But then last year we lost 3-0 to Peterborough, and then we won the first few games. So, yeah, friendlies aren't, the most important thing. But yeah, we started the pre-season with a full fit squad, and then we've got 3 or 4 injuries. And, we're signing Connolly, and if he does exactly the same as last year, he'll be injured immediately as well. So that's the main thing. That's the main thing that hindered us last season. So hopefully they get fit soon. And it's annoying that Cynic hasn't been able to play at all. We all thought that if he had a good pre-season and came back with us, he could have a good season, but he's not played at all. And surely he's got to be one of the outgoings as well. Because if we need to sell a few players, perhaps, then, we'll probably get a few million for him being a young player.
Yeah, I sort of wonder with that one, because Ajun seems to have come out so sort of steadfastly in his defence or sort of bigging him up for the season. It almost feels as if we're either not prepared to sell him or whether there's just no one interested at the price that we're sort of asking for. It's a very interesting one, as you say. I mean, he took some time off for his wedding, hasn't really linked up with the squad all that much over the pre-season. He's sort of a fascinating one to me, where it sort of reminds me of, not to the same extreme, but James Scott, where it's the big fee and it just doesn't seem to click. It just doesn't seem to work.
That is a perfect comparison.
Yeah. Well, so what are your thoughts on pre-season, Will?
Obviously, the main thing about pre-season is to try and get tactics right and match fitness. Obviously, if you ask Twitter, if we're not winning a game, it's literally the end of the world. But Twitter always brings out the worst in people anyway. So, sorry, X brings out the worst in people.
Yes.
But Galatasaray was a good result. The thing with the Galatasaray one is, maybe it's good to see that the team showed that they can have some resilience to come back from a deficit to win. I know it's only pre-season, as we say, but it kind of shows something there. Performances have been, I think, okay for the most part. Not amazing, but not terrible either. Some players have been okay. But like I say, it's mainly a fitness thing for me. And as long as the players get fit and they get more into how Rosini wants to play, it's only a positive regardless. I mean, we lost to Winterton Rangers the season we first went to the Premier League. The results mean absolutely nothing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's more so the performances, I suppose. And I was just curious, because I was talking to Ant before we went to air, in terms of, as you say, the Twitter bubble, I suppose, and the sort of malaise that's sort of descending over a lot of City fans, which I think is partly the results with a lot of draws and partly the lack of signings, probably people just not seeing the improvement that they were expecting or hoping for from last season.
I find that funny, because people are going, we were too open last season, we signed too many players when they wanted, now this season we're not signing enough. Which one is it?
Yeah, no, and I think that was Dan's point, which was so good, which was, in a way, it's actually good. Well, I mean, we were sort of coming into this summer expecting or thinking that Greaves and Oscar might be on the way out, and it's looking at least at this stage likely that they're hanging around, at least for now, which can only be a good thing. I mean, do we really want to be signing 3 to 4 more players because we've sold those players, or would we rather hold on to those players? And I think I know I'd certainly prefer the latter. Dan, I might bring you in here. We can talk, if you've got thoughts on the preseason performances or anything like that as well. But also, off-field news as well. We've got obviously the new kit this season, more memberships sold, things like that. How are you feeling overall with the sort of the place that City are sitting in going into the new season?
I think I'm not too worried. I think, as the lads have said, like, preseason's not really about results. It's about getting those tactics right, working some things out, getting minutes under the legs, and just building towards the season. I think, as I think Nathaniel said, like, this game against Nantes is really important because it's the last one leading in. So this is where really, if they're hitting their straps for that first game of the season, they need to be showing that they're ready tonight. In terms of everything else, like, I think the general positivity, with lots of memberships and stuff, is really good. It means that we're still moving in the right direction as a club as a whole. Twitter and the whole City fans forum and all of that, they can just go bollock themselves because it's just ridiculous. There's stuff that comes out, well, not out of their mouths, but from their keyboards, and that I read, and they just, whinge about tactics and whinge about this and whinge about that. And I hold my tongue keep my fingers at bay for as long as I can, but occasionally I just let loose on one of them and say, what do you guys want? Like, you can't win every game, and if you're trying to, like, build a system, that takes time. Like, Guardiola and Man City, that, without trying to make too big a comparison, but that does not happen overnight. It is a process, and you need to stick to it, and you need to keep working on it, and you can't just throw it aside at the first hurdle, because then essentially you just have to start again with whatever new system you decide is going to happen. If you decide we don't want to play out from the back, we want to play long, well, then you need to then start building all the systems that make that style of play work. So I don't really, it really frustrates me, all the, the shit about just throwing it all out and starting again, because then we're not really moving forward. We're just, treading water. The shirts, I think I've got the same sort of queries as everyone else with the, what's it, all black back and everything, but whatever. They come up with interesting designs every now and then.
I saw, I think, did City tease last night that they're going to reveal the away shirt, and it looks all
amber. It's meant to be.
Yeah. Looks brilliant. What are your thoughts on that?
It's an interesting concept because, like, sorry, just before you start stealing, the fact that the away shirt is going to have more amber than the home, sort of just absolutely it blows my brain. But I'm really excited to see what they produce, because I think it'd be really interesting.
Yeah, I'm actually more keen on the away kit than the home kit, the way it's looking. So that'll certainly be pretty interesting. Logan, I guess your thoughts as well on how we're shaping up for preseason. I was actually thinking about it from our perspective, and it hasn't really been talked about too much or focused on too much. But obviously, we moved off iFollow over the summer with the new streaming service being set up. They still haven't released subscription details, which is a little bit frustrating a week out from the season, because it does mean, look, I'm hoping worst case scenario they release details for the first game of the season, and then the subscription might be after that. But it'd be nice to be able to actually watch City for the opening game of the season. So hopefully that's not too far away.
Well, we're old enough to remember the dark days of 2 a.m. listening to BBC Humberside from our living rooms, I think it was at that stage, Alex. So hopefully some level of streaming service is provided. Otherwise, we'll probably end up watching it in the small window of like a Bet365 screen, or look for some Iraqi goals, the legal stream, or something along those lines. But yeah, certainly, I think they'll sort that out in the next couple of days. I think they always do. I'm certain that a few years ago they moved from Tigers TV to whatever other streaming platform it was, and it came really late in the piece. So I'm sure that at this modern day of football, and to be playing in the championship, there'll be something for us late in the piece. And I just wanted to say on the preseason, there's nothing kind of overwhelming about how impressive, but the sneaky form of Regan Slater, I still think he's shaping up to be the cheapest best signing in many years, because he seems to be really finding his feet even more so, and maturing as a player. keeps finding the net too. So it's really good to see his continual impact, and we're not getting beaten. I think that's one of the biggest things in the championship. If we are good enough to continue to find results and draws, and I'm not just talking about the preseason games, but even the back end of last season, it was really hard to kind of for us to give up 3 points. Often we would escape with one, and so if you can do that, most of the games and win your home games or a large portion, that's almost good enough to get you in the six. And I think that's certainly, going to be the expectations for this season, if we're to be honest, in the direction that it seems like the club's heading. If we are to improve, one of those playoff spots is certainly the aim.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, that looks like a good point to segue into the main focus of this episode, being our predictions for the coming season. And before we do, I'll just take the moment to say we've got 12 people watching, which is very much appreciated and awesome to see. If you haven't already, subscribe to our channel, because we will be releasing episodes each and every week to talk about the season as we go through. So any support would be much appreciated. But what we'll do, I think, is we'll go around the room on each of the predictions one at a time, and probably get everyone to tell us who their player or what their prediction of a particular thing is, and then also why they made that particular prediction. So I think we'll probably start with our best new signing, who people think is the best new signing, which we've kind of already touched on a little bit anyway. So I suspect we'll probably all have pretty similar answers. But I'll start with you, Ant. Who do you think will be the best new signing, and why?
Vinagre, just for the very obvious reason that he's been there, done it before. Like you say, it's almost like a mirror to Cyrus Christie. So having both of them as an option for overlap on either side is just going to be such an exciting prospect and a nightmare one for championship defences. Because if you've got, especially the inverted wingers that he plays, you've got them bombing on, and you've got 4 or 5 people in the box waiting to get on the end of something. So if he's looking at overloading the box, we've got the perfect fullbacks to do that now. And he's just a very exciting signing. He's up there with like the Seri and the Oscar style signing for me. Very exciting.
And just on that, so does anyone actually think with the players that we've signed, it almost lends itself more to a 3-5-2 formation and actually having them playing as wing backs? It feels as if, especially at the moment we've brought in Lakilo to play on the wing, I suppose, but it does feel like with a bit of depth lacking on the wings, that and with Vinagre and Christie being such attacking fullbacks, that it almost feels like a 3-5-2 would work better with the players that we've got. But
I'd like to see us try it.
Yeah, it'd be an interesting one, especially with Delap and Oscar. I suppose now with Tete leaving, it's not necessarily as crowded in the forwards area, but it certainly would be interesting. Nathaniel, who was your prediction for best new signing?
Well, I did say at the start, I guess it's Vinagre. On my notes, I have also got in brackets Longman staying. That's our best signing, but it's probably worth doing again in a few weeks, because we have got over a month left of the transfer window, and we'll have Connolly probably, and maybe if Tete's leaving, I think Connolly might be the replacement. But then Adrian said we want 4 strikers, so maybe we're going to sign another striker on top of that. So probably worth doing again. Mbappe, I wouldn't mind that. Then just to mention about the 3-5-2 thing, I guess you'd have Christie right wing back, but it's really strange that he was really good going forward last season from right back, but then when we'd play Coyle at right back and Christie at winger, he was always really rubbish. So I don't know how that works. So maybe it wouldn't work. I don't know.
Yeah, I just showed a comment from Paul saying that the best new signing is probably not through the door. That is true. It does make it difficult with the window still open for another, I think it's about a month, isn't it? So we've still got a bit of time to make a signing. But Will, who is your view on best signing so far, I suppose we'll say?
It's probably, to be boring, probably still is also Vinagre, but since he's got that. But Liam Delap, I think, if he hits the ground running, could be superb.
Yeah, no doubt. I think, it seems with those sort of striker signings that it does come down to almost the first month. And if they can get a few goals and get up and running, they can be brilliant.
And also hit the ground really running.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then it's almost like if they don't, then my worry for him is after his spells with Stoke and Preston last season that he might get in his own head a little bit. But look, hopefully he can, like as you were saying earlier, I think especially with the style of play suiting him hopefully more because it's more in line with that Man City style, that might certainly help him. Dan, I wonder if it's going to be a clean sweep of Vinagre predictions, but who is your prediction for, I guess, new signing of the season?
Look, yeah, I'm continuing the trend. I think Vinagre certainly at the moment, is probably the best. As I think Ant said, like, the experience at this level, he's sort of done it before. So someone with some caliber and some quality, in an area that was pretty much an area of weakness last season. It's hard to look past that.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm sure we'll get a bit more varied responses for the next prediction, but we'll just round things off. Logan, who's your prediction for best new signing of the season?
Look, I've got to give some kind of spanner in the works to this segment. And as much as I do agree, I think Vinagre is the obvious one. But look, if we can call Connolly a new signing, I feel like this has got to be his breakout year. He's promised so much he's still a very young player, but he's been signed by very credentialed clubs, and there's obviously a lot of promise and hype behind him. And injury has been his excuse, thus far as to why he hasn't reached the heights that perhaps are expected of him. And I just think, he's kind of that sneaky under the radar signing that isn't really getting that much, not getting talked about that much. But you can only, particularly as a young player, you can only have too many of those injury-prone early seasons before, your credentials kind of fly out the window. So he needs to break out if he's going to, go on and have that career that was promised of him. So let's hope that it's this year. I'm going to throw him as my dark horse and hope that it's him.
Yes, and we can't forget the English talent. That's sort of that mystery signing that we could potentially get towards the end of the window. So that would be a curious one as well. Look, I'll probably go Vinagre as well. I do think it's actually a really good point that if we get a fit Connolly for the whole season, from what we saw in those 5 games, if you're getting sort of 40 to 45 games of that level of application from him, I think that's a pretty quality signing in itself. And look, we'll go reverse order again. So Logan, I'll start with you on this one as well. Who do you have as your most improved player over the course of the coming season?
Well, that's a good question. I think my most improved player, I've kind of touched on already, is Slater. I think that he's trending that way, and I don't really know what his ceiling is. I think that kind of the bar was not set low. That's unfair, but I guess it was just the transfer fee was so minimal that there wasn't really that much promise. And from what we've kind of seen from him over the last sort of 18 months, I'm really excited to see just how much he develops as a player. So yeah, I'm gonna lock Slater in.
Very nice. Okay, and Dan, who's your prediction?
I'm kind of torn between 2 here, because at first I was thinking someone like Traore, who came in and showed a lot of promise but didn't get a lot of minutes at the end of last season. But I think I'm actually going to go with Ozan Tufan, who, actually the same sort of thing, but played lots of games last year, but for a long period of that time of last season, really kind of struggled to have a big impact. But, I think they, tweaked his positioning, tweaked what he was doing, and towards the end, I think really started to stand up and have an impact, and is feeling really valued, and loved by the club. And I think that's making a difference for him. So I think he's primed for a big year and having a big impact, double figures on goals and assists.
No, I don't mind that one at all. Will, who's most improved?
It's a tricky one because, like you said, I think it could be, going back to what Dan said. I think Traore is a good shout because for that reason he didn't play many minutes, but he looked really good when he did play. And if he does get fit and stays fit, I think the way he was playing, he could easily be a player of the season contender for us come the end of the season.
Yeah, I think that's it was sort of I guess hyped expectation because of the wait that we had to actually see him debut. And he actually I think he lived up to it. I mean, I was really skeptical when we first signed him when I looked at his stats from his previous clubs, and I wasn't sure what he actually would bring as a creative midfielder. He didn't have a whole lot of goals and assists to his name, but look, I mean, some of the games he played last season were unbelievable. So if he can stay fit, and it's sort of similar to Connolly, if we can get a full season out of him, it could be quite an exciting one. Nathaniel, who's your player for most improved?
Is this going to be the player that's most improved this season, or based on their performances from last?
Do not say who I think you're going to say.
No.
I was fully expecting him to say who we thought he was going to say.
Long men can't improve. He's already great.
Because I suppose the way I look at this is sort of either their level of performance last season, or if they're you could go for a new signing. I think I had Tufan as my most improved last season as well, because it's almost the expectation of them at the start of the season versus where they actually get to at the end of the season.
Well, in my notes, I'd put who I thought was going to improve the most this year, and I know he already won Fans Player of the Season, but he's already got the most goals in pre-season. When I was doing the little preview for the Nantes fan website, I said our best player at the moment is Slater. So I think he might win Player of the Season again with even more goals. I think playing in this attacking sort of role, he's playing on the wing and winning us penalties and getting goals and assists towards the end of the season. I think, especially if he gets a goal at home this season, he could have a fantastic year, and maybe at the end of this season we'll be saying Slater's our best young prospect rather than a Greaves perhaps. So I think Slater's going to be our best player this year perhaps.
Yeah, it's a great chat, and he's actually my pick for most improved as well. And I don't know if any of you guys played Gaffer, which is the championship equivalent of FPL, and I signed up for an account the other day and noticed that Slater's in there as a 5 million midfielder, which I think is ridiculously cheap for someone. As you say, I mean, he's leading goal scorer over pre-season. I think he's spoken about the fact that he wanted to add more goals to his game. So I also think he's in for a massive season. And we'll round out with Ant. Who's your take for most improved player?
Last season, I thought, because you see, the Alfie Jones at the start of the season that finished the season was polar opposite. So from last year, I'd have said Jonesy was the most improved, because Slater was consistent throughout the year. That's why I picked him for player of the year in my vote over Jones.
To be fair to Jones, he was next to Figueiredo for most of the
time. He was. No, but he also played in like the anchor role in midfield as well, didn't he? So, I mean, the whole team struggled at the beginning of the season, didn't they? Let's be honest. But I do think that this season's going to be an important one for Aliar. And I think this is probably the season that he needs to provide something to the squad in order to still be here long term. Because the thing is with Aliar is he has so much promise. He does everything right up until he gets into the final third, and then his brain just turns off. So I'm thinking this year with regular game time, no injuries disrupting his form. Because let's not forget, he was probably our best player at the start of last season before he got cropped at Burnley.
Playing at left wing back or something, wasn't he?
Yeah, he played really well. And I'm just thinking that if we can find that kind of form again and keep it consistent over a season, then he's going to have gone from, we need to get rid of him because he's terrible and can't finish, to, oh, there's that promise that we were, promised. So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, that's a really good shout as well. I mean, there's so many players, and I mean, you could even look at, we've touched on Cynic before, but someone like that, if they could just burst in and show the potential that we paid all that money for, I mean, we can hope.
Because with Aliar, he's still only 22, is he? So he's, he's still got. I think when, like we said, just whenever he seems to find a bit of form, he gets injured, and then he can't seem to recover it when he comes back. So hoping now for pre-season this season, he just keeps it consistent throughout.
Yeah, no doubt. Probably an interesting one. I mean, I probably would have had a different player as my answer for this one prior to Jarvis going out on loan, but I wanted to get from each of you, and I'll start with you, and prediction for player most likely to break through from the academy.
Can't say on because he's technically in the first team, isn't he? I'd like to see Jim Sims get a chance this season, especially if Tete is going, and like we say, we've got another spot in the striker position. I do think that there's a lot of hype around Sims, and I think that given this season, if we're not going to send him out on loan rather than keeping him in the under 23s, let's see him have a couple of shots in the first team, especially in cup games or off the bench every now and again, because we're undoubtedly going to get quite a few injuries, aren't we? So yeah, I'm going to put my money on Jim Sims. I think he'll have a part to play this season.
Yeah, nice shout, Nathaniel.
Well, I suppose after Figueiredo's gone and we haven't really looked to bring in another centre back, surely Andy Smith is ready to be at least a backup to a Jones or to whoever. So I think Andy Smith, if he counts, I mean, he's already played so much football. I don't know if he's an
hope he
academy
counts
player.
because he's also my choice.
He's also
Still
my choice.
obvious
so-
choice. Yeah.
Yeah. So Will, you're going Andy Smith as well? Because
Yeah, I'm going with Smith as well.
has he made a league start for City yet?
No, he's not played
no,
for City yet at all in a competitive game.
because he was at Grimsby last season, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, and he was very good for Grimsby as well. He's been there for the past 2 seasons.
Right. Yeah. No, good shit.
Yeah, I think he'll get into the team. He's one of the few players who's looked quite good, I think, in pre-season. And I think he'll get his chance at some point.
Yeah, I must confess, I think was it coming into this summer window, that was it Palace and Leicester and a few others were sort of linked with having a bit of interest in him. And I didn't know a whole lot about him at that stage. So sort of brushed up on him. But look, from all reports, he's had a few chances over the preseason and impressed Rosenior. So it might have saved us a bit of a spend if we can just replace Figueiredo with Smith. I'm sure it's a pretty low bar to beat, I suppose, as a member of the first team. Dan, who's your take for player to break through from the academy?
Well, firstly, you had me very panicked when you asked a question about the academy boys, because not too familiar with them, unfortunately. But then before Nathaniel said anything, I was thinking about which names were not super familiar to me from preseason games, and I was like, oh yeah, the young lad who is my namesake had done pretty well. So I'm also on the Andy Smith train.
Great, good shout. And Logan?
I'm similar to Dan as far as academy knowledge, and Andy Smith was the only name that I actually knew that I thought would
look at these plastics
break in. So sorry for my lack of knowledge in the academy squad. I'll jump off the podcast and go to some study.
No dramas at all. Now this one's probably a pretty controversial one potentially, depending on the answer, and it's a yes or no question. And I'll start with you, Logan. Do you think Rosenior will still be in charge at the end of the season?
Yes.
And you can say why as well.
Look, I think that Liam Rosenior is one of the few managers that's come into City with a plan and has made no kind of bones about it from the start. He talked about how he wanted to instill a philosophy in the club. He talked about how we were going to play football out from the back and be prepared to make mistakes. But ultimately, he wants a team that's comfortable on the ball, and I think that he hasn't abandoned that philosophy since he's been there. And even still, the results have, slowly improved. And I think that there's just the confidence in the way that he talks. He's born and bred, I guess, from City. And I think he resonates with the current playing group and the fans. And I think that he's going to get, a lot of, a long rope. And I think that he's going to prove many of the doubters wrong. I'm really impressed with him so far.
Dan?
Yes, I do think he'll be in charge, and similar to what Logan said, I think I've been thinking about a lot of stuff, but with like Tottenham signing Postecoglou and an Australian connection, but someone who comes in and says this is the plan. There's going to be times it's not going to work, but we're going to stick with it and we're going to build it is realistically what you want. And I think it would be foolhardy. I mean, I was referencing this kind of stuff before. It's foolhardy to start buying into a vision and a play style and then abandon it if things aren't going well. And I can't see, like, the progress we made in the second half of last season, I think shows that we are moving in the right direction. Barring, like 20 games without a win, knock on wood that is not what's going to happen. But barring some sort of massive disaster, I can't see any reason why he wouldn't still be in charge.
Yeah, and look, and the reason that I included this question here is it's a choose my words carefully. It's a valid observation from Paul, I suppose, in the sense that some people are frustrated with the style of play, the lack of goals, and the number of draws that we're sort of racking up. But then to Logan's point around the defensive resilience built in at the end of last season, turning those losses into draws that we saw so often under Shotter, it's taking that next step. And I suppose that's why I asked this question, is that do we think 12 months on, or I guess 9 months on, if Rosenior will still be the man, if he has managed to achieve that slightly more attacking edge to the style of play as well. Will, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, he will be here at the end of the season. I think, bar something obviously utterly catastrophic form-wise, I think Adrian's learned from bringing in someone like Shota. I think he's realised he needed to bring someone who has a long-term plan, has an idea of what he wants to bring over a certain amount of time. I think Liam's kind of convinced him on what he wants to build at the club quite well. And also, I think what helps with it being Adrian, who is a media guy, Liam becoming a bit of a media darling, I think, in terms of how he acts around, like in terms of EFL managers in particular. And I think it makes Adrian look good, that as well.
Yeah, no, that's actually a good point I hadn't considered. And I do feel like you sort of see them out there, and I feel like there's a bit of a bromance developing between Liam and Adrian, because were they at they're at the World Cup final or the Champions League final?
Well,
or
both, I
something?
They were
think.
both.
Yeah, geez. I mean, it's a pretty cushy job at City if you're going to
Lucky.
get kind of wined and dined by the owner and go to all the big sporting events. Yeah, Nathaniel, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think maybe he doesn't quite have enough experience. And I mean, I think we might finish. I mean, I'm jumping ahead again, but maybe just outside the playoffs. So perhaps we wouldn't be doing so well to encourage this. But it's almost more likely that if he does leave during the season, it's because some Premier League club in March is desperate to stay up and they want to get him in rather than us sacking him. Because I think it's more likely he'll leave higher up because he just comes across so well. And, but there isn't really a bad thing we can say about Rossini at the moment. I mean, we saw that video at the start of the season or at pre-season about being the best in the 24 clubs at everything. That's just exactly the sort of thing you want to hear. So, perhaps it's more likely he'll go somewhere higher up. But I think we won't get promoted, so I think he'll probably stay around 10th and he will be here.
Have you heard something about Guardiola leaving or something?
My worry, in all seriousness, is actually Brighton, because of the fact that he has that connection to Brighton. And if De Zerbi gets pinched to somewhere, that if we're,
that's not a bad shout at all.
That's
honestly.
a very good shout. Very good shout.
If we're around about top 6, they might actually look at him and go, he plays the right style, he knows the club, let's go and get him. But look, it's actually, I hadn't considered that element of the question. I was thinking more in terms of being sacked, but yes, absolutely, he could get poached before the end of the season.
It's a sort of stylish, cool sort of thing Brighton would do. Oh, let's get Liam Rossini,
Yeah. Hopefully not. And what are your thoughts?
Yeah, he'll be here, and I don't think he'll be poached. I don't think he'll be sacked. I think this is a long-term project that will have been pitched to him when he was going for the job. He want at the moment. Well, at the time he was getting hired, the club needed stability. We needed somebody with a vision. We needed somebody who knew what they were going to try and do and understood the club. And he ticked all those boxes. And the thing is, in terms of being poached by especially Premier League sides, I just think that the lack of experience is on our side in that thing. Obviously, he's a very new manager. I think Premier League clubs might hesitate to gamble on somebody who's not been a manager for that long. So hopefully that plays into our favour. But I do think that you've always got to judge a manager on how he gets the best out of the players that he's got. So that was always my biggest criticism of McCann, was he never switched the system to better get results from the squad of players he had, especially after we lost Bowen and Grosicki. But Rossini inherited Shota's squad last season, and we were probably the most consistent side in the league. 28 games, only 60 defeats. Yes, we drew a lot, but that was because of other factors such as a lot of injuries. A lot of attacking players weren't available, so we just kind of made ourselves hard to beat, and we did that. So he adapted. He made the squad hard to beat because we were just pushovers beforehand. So this season, you'd think with a squad that maybe he's still got his hands tied in terms of not being able to buy players, but he's brought in a couple that he wants. It's starting to change things a bit. And I just think that this system, as long as it shows promise and that we're coming out of games where we're still in it, and by the end of the season, we've at least challenged for the top 6, I don't think there's no reason he'd get sacked. And I think that's what will happen. I think we'll be just outside the top 6, but we'll fight for him. And that's the minimum, I think, for this season.
Yeah, no, fair point. And that's it's a good transition to the next prediction then. And I'll start with you, Ant, on this one. Is what would be the biggest red flag in your mind after the first month? And I suppose by red flag, I sort of think, after a month of the season, if we're sitting there thinking, oh, geez, this is actually going pretty pear-shaped. I mean, last season, I think my red flag was too many goals conceded, and that was certainly the case after a month. But what's your red flag?
So I think the thing is, last season, obviously, we shut the door. We were very good defensively. We were getting a lot more clean sheets, and we made ourselves out to beat. But our only Achilles heel was we couldn't score goals. So I think as long as we start this season again hard to beat, where we're still in games of by a goal or pinching draws here and there, and still not scoring, that's not too much of a worry. But I think if we're coming out of games and we're losing and still not scoring, that'll be the biggest worry, because it shows that we've not really changed from last season in the sense of being able to put the ball in the back of the net. We only scored 50 something, was it, last season? So it's clear what our biggest weakness is at the minute. We just need to have that clinical edge in the final third, and whether or not Rosini manages to get it across to the players, the best, that build-up play, that approach play in the final third, jumping into the box kind of thing, and composure in front of goal. Because we definitely need to add more goals to our game. But if we're losing in the same sense, that's going to be an issue.
Yeah, no doubt. I realised I didn't give my answer either, but I said yes, I think Rosini will be there end of the season. Nathaniel, biggest red flag?
I mean, the serious answer is just what Ant said. The defensive solidity was our best thing under Rosini last year. So if we lose that and the attack hasn't improved, that's not good. But I guess the major red flag after a month would be if we've lost every game. Just something as simple as that. And I've also got, also in brackets, Longman leaves.
Yeah, that's actually
something's wrong at the club if Longman leaves. He's part of the furniture now. You might not like him. He's the dirty chair in the corner no one sits on, but you don't want to. It's part of the living room. You can't get rid of him.
Character. Yeah,
he's got character. Yeah.
Well, that's a good point. You could raise a red flag off the field as well. I mean, it's not the red flag I went with, but for example, if Graves and Oscar were to leave and we were to replace them with a few loans, that would probably be a bit of a red flag. But Will, what was your biggest red flag going into the first month?
It's a bit annoying because it's pretty much the same thing to an extent. It's obviously last season we were turning those losses into draws, and then if we're keeping drawing and not having loads of chances and not putting them away, that is a concern. That we've had all these months of playing this football. Obviously, we're sort of learning it, but it's still an issue that we can't score these chances. A lot of them that we had were very easy chances. A lot of the time last season, if we still can't put them away, that is a concern.
Can I interject? I mean, I know I said red flag Longman leaving, but for everyone else, would a red flag be that Longman has to start every game because of another injury crisis? That'd be also pretty bad for you, not for me, of course.
I mean, I don't despise Longman like everyone else seems to, but
you don't despise him.
He's like third choice, so it would suggest a lot of injuries.
Yeah, and I think actually I'll jump in there as well because mine's sort of along the same lines as mine was too many draws, but I suppose to expand on that, it's the too many draws that are potentially like 0-0 or something like that where we just aren't getting going. Yeah, that's right. And I sort of think along the same lines as the Huddersfield draw last season, which was, I think, 1-1. Those sort of 1-1 draws, like, Blackpool and Sunderland as well, where you think those should be wins. We need to start turning those into wins if we really want to challenge or have a part to play in the pointy end of the season. Dan, what was your biggest red flag?
Well, I was all primed, and then Nathaniel jumped in for a second bite at the cherry and stole it. Not actually the Longman part, the injury part, though. I was maybe not in the first month, but I think mostly about if we haven't learned the lessons of managing those injuries from last season, because I think Ali came back too soon once or twice last year. I think Oscar as well, came back a little too soon with one of those. There was just a few issues, especially with those soft tissue injuries, hamstrings. Those are things you need to be really careful. And I think it was a consequence of a broader injury crisis as well, but we sort of threw those guys in because they were close and we didn't really have anyone else. But I think it backfired, and I think with some of those players that we have, who can have a huge impact on the game, I think we can't afford to essentially make those same mistakes in terms of managing the injured players. We've got a few already, and if we rush them back in for the start of the season, and they re-injure themselves, and then they're out for 12 weeks. Well, was it worth it? to pick up 3 points in the third game of the season.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then rounding it out with Logan.
Yeah, I got two kind of ones, and I think most of the boys have mentioned probably the bigger ones like leaking goals and that kind of stuff. But one of the things for me would be like key injury. So I think Ali and Connolly in particular, like those two are, injury prone kind of as we know it. And I think that they're pretty critical to our kind of run. And so if we can get those guys fit and, you not see the usual suspects, I guess, early injuries, I think that would be really helpful. And then the second one I got with kind of leaking goals, it'd just be if we've leaked goals playing out from the back, because I feel like that's a really critical thing in the Rosignol manager philosophy. And I feel like if we were to keep conceding goals, then that's when the forums light up and the fans start to get a little bit edgy and lose a little bit of belief in the system. And I feel like that can kind of maybe dent the confidence of the players who are trying to apply themselves to that particular philosophy. So they're probably the two things that I thought about in a roundabout way.
It doesn't take much to light the forums up, Logan.
I cannot wait for the scene in the press box and just hearing them going, "Get it forward!" every 5 minutes.
And then it comes back to that comment where it said about the style being boring. I mean, the thing is I grew up and I idolized, like, when Pep Guardiola was at Barca and that side that he had, that style of play to me was ideal. I'd rather watch us keep the ball and do these nice little tiki-taka intricate passes. I'd rather watch that than us lump it forward like Tony Pulis used to do at Stoke. So I guess what defines boring is it obviously will differentiate between each person. But if you're keeping the ball, the other team can't score. So do you know what I mean? I can understand why he's doing the system he's doing, and the odd mistake is going to be an occupational hazard with this system. It's just going to happen. But on the other hand, we're going to control most of the games and not be under the cosh and possibly create more chances under it. So, you know what I mean? You've got to enjoy and you've got to believe in it. For me, if it comes to January and we're for some bizarre reason conceding goal after goal by sloppy passes at the back and might as well kick it around into our own net kind of thing, then yeah, you could probably raise it as an issue. But at this moment in time, I don't see it as an issue at all.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring up a comparison on that actually real quick before we can move on. Since this is Australian English, Bazball is ace. I love it, Bazball, and it's great attacking cricket. Who's winning the Ashes?
I was just about to say, I think we love Bazball too.
But who's winning the Ashes? Not playing amazingly exciting attacking cricket, but playing what works and wins.
Yeah.
Who is winning?
Not England.
That's not good.
The rain helped us in that one.
True, but
yes.
What do you expect when you play Manchester?
Well, that's it. And that's a whole other podcast. I mean, when you've got light until 10 p.m., but you don't play when it's not raining. But anyway, Logan, I'll start with you. This is probably, or could be, one where we all get pretty similar answers as we go around, but I'll start with you on who you think will be the top goal scorer this season.
I don't think Oscar will be. I know that doesn't answer the question, but I feel like he just got out of the gates and was off to a flyer last season, and we were so surprised that how quickly he led the championship for the first 10 weeks. I'm pretty sure. For some reason, I don't think it'll be him, and I don't really know how to qualify my answer any more than that. And I'm putting so much belief. I still believe that Connolly could be that guy. And I know that that's a very outlandish one. And I reckon when we do the mid-season review, everyone will probably pepper me for being so high on Connolly. But look, I'm believing. I'm going to say Connolly.
No, fair enough. Connolly is to you as Longman is to Nathaniel, perhaps.
That's right.
Dan, who do you think will be top goal scorer?
Yeah, not sure. So I'm just going to kind of default to an answer, something I predicted earlier in the pod, which was Tufan for double figures goals and assists. So I'm just going to go with Tufan. I think he's primed for a big season. But Connolly's a good shout if he does get through the door. I think he showed some real promise and some clinical finishing ability in his limited time. Those couple of goals were real nice.
Yeah, Tufan's the pen merchant as well, though, so he's going to pad his stats with those, which will help. Will, who's your prediction?
I'm going to validate Logan here, and I also think it's going to be Connolly.
Oh, good shout. Yeah.
Purely because when he was playing, he did score. Well, when the brief period he was playing, he was scoring goals as well. And I think if he's playing alongside full time, alongside up front with Delap or Oscar, if he's staying fit, he'll definitely get into double figures.
No, yeah, it's a great shout. It's a much more varied responses than I actually thought we were going to get.
The thing is, it'll end up being Oscar, won't it? Now we've said all this.
Yeah. No. Nathaniel, who do you think?
Well, I mean, a lot of Connolly talk. Speaking of former Brighton forwards.
No.
Okay. Well, I've already predicted Oscar to be the top scorer on another thing, so I'll try and stick with that and be consistent. Otherwise, I can say at the end of the season, I got it.
I mean, Longman might get it in the under 21s.
Well, yeah, or it could, win the Irish Player of the Year in Shelbourne, perhaps. No, I mean, probably Oscar. I mean, he did score in bunches last season, but I mean, hopefully he's had a bit of time to get better with the system. And if he is playing up front with Connolly or with Delap or someone else, then maybe he will, be more consistent this season. So he's still at the club. So I think the obvious choice is Oscar.
Yeah, but it's an important qualifier because I went with Oscar as well on the proviso that he's still at the club. I think it's hard to look past what he was achieving last season. But it is interesting when you sort of discount that purple patch at the start of the season, just what his form was under Rosenia. So I think it could be quite an open race for top goal scorer this season. And who did you think?
It'll be Oscar because the thing is he scored 13 goals last season, and I don't actually think I can probably count on one hand how many games he actually played well in. So if you can score 13 goals and not be anywhere near the kind of player that we know he can be, and I think he missed about a month and a half, 2 months with either injury / suspension. So he'd be close to 20 goals if he played the full year. And strikers at this level always struggle to score 10 to 15, and he did that in his first season, and that's with playing as a lone striker in the middle. His best games came when he played with a partner. Now we all know every single City fan will say the same thing. He's better with a strike partner. He's not going to lead the line. That's not his game. He's a poacher. He needs somebody else to hold the ball up so he can get in the box. And I think this season with us trying to play two up top, although it sacrifices a bit in terms of possession in the middle, if we're trying to play two strikers and have Connolly alongside him, it's going to be a perfect combo. And I think he's looked a lot sharper this season. He's improved on some aspects of his game. And the thing is with Connolly is he's not scored more than 5 at any club he's been at. So, he's played 55 for Brighton. Yeah, some of them will have been in the Premier League. He scored 2 for us last season, but it was in the same game. So he got 1 in 5 goal rate. You know what I mean? He's got to hit the ground running if he's going to be top scorer. I do think he'll contribute a lot. I just don't think it'll be as much as Oscar.
We should probably say that Connolly hasn't been announced, so he could. I mean, I had a dream he'd sign for Millwall. That could happen.
He'll feel the medical.
Yeah. He'll stub his toe in the medical, and I shouldn't joke about that. Maybe it's hopefully he's all fit.
It's safe there as an alternate. I'm going to say Liam Delap.
Good shout. With Oscar, I feel like the weird thing about him, it's this thing that you see in some players is that it's almost the more time that they have to think about what they need to do, the less likely it seemed that he was going to score the goal.
Yeah, so he's an absolute poacher. If you put him in the box around the 6 yard, he just feeds off the scraps. That's the kind of striker he is.
Yeah, so we're just going to get the ball in.
Sheffield United game where he had the whole half of the pitch to run and then just kind of poked it right at the keeper. And that was awful. Yeah. So.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll finish off with finishing position, but first we'll go with one that I did slip in quite late, so I suspect people haven't potentially prepared for it. But I've also got in here who we think will be player of the season. We've sort of touched on it already a bit with most improved and things like that. I'll start with you, Ant. Who do you think will be our best player this season?
Christie. I think if Cyrus Christie was fit all last season, I think he will have been in at least contention for the player of the season last year. I just think he's the way he's everything you want in a fullback, and I think he was absolutely crucial to our attacking play last season. And when as good as Coyle's delivery is, I don't think he gets himself in as good positions or offers as much goal threat. And obviously Cyrus scored goals too. So as a fullback, if you're adding goals from there, all it means is that everybody else has to do their job in terms of goals and assists, and you've got that extra, haven't you? So for me, I think if Christie can stay fit all season, I think it'll be him.
Oh, good shout. Nathaniel?
Yeah, I mean, I've said it already. I think it'll be Regan Slater. He was it wasn't Rossinia's. Didn't Rossinia say it was Alfie Jones last season? But I think Regan Slater, if he stays, he's added the goals and the assists to his game. So I think I'll go him.
Fair enough. And Will?
Yeah, I think I mentioned a lot of different players, but I think I'm going to go with probably the popular choice and say 50 grand Regan Slater.
Yeah,
he seems to do everything he does well. He does really well.
Yeah. And he seems. I'm trying to think. Probably the last time we've had a player like him. I'm struggling for who it would be, but just that sort of jack of all trades. But he's also becoming a master of all of them as well.
Myler, I think.
Yeah, Myler's the one.
Yeah, but quicker than Myler was, I think.
Yeah, he has more pace.
But maybe not going to win as many headers.
Yeah.
Or headbutt duels with Alan Pardew, perhaps. Dan, who's your pick for player of the season? And actually, I reckon it might be the same as mine.
I'm jumping on the Slater bandwagon for this. There's a few other names floating around my head, but I think Slater, and I think I know we bought him for 50 grand, but he really needs to lose the 50 grand tag because he's worth so much more than that.
50 mil. I've actually gone with Ozan Tufan, and I thought after saying he'd get double figures for goals and assists, you might have gone there as well. But I think, as you sort of touched on before, the way that he's been preparing and seems to be improving under Rossinia, I think he could be in for a pretty big season for us. And Logan, who's your pick for player of the season?
Look, I feel like if I've said Connolly's going to be our leading goal scorer, and assuming he signs, I'm going to have to double down on the Connolly stock and say that he'd be the best player, because if he does have a season where he's uninjured and scores as much as I'm claiming he will, then he'd have to be that guy. But I think Slater's a really good shout. And the other person that I'm really excited to play, I don't know if he'll quite reach that height, but just to see, where Vaughan gets to, I feel like this is going to be an incredible season for him. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's in the conversation for player of the season. I think he'll contribute a lot, but I just think that he's probably another couple of years off, reaching the absolute heights of player of the season in a championship squad.
He can be a young player of the season.
Yeah, if he plays as he did, he's surely a shoo-in for young player. It has to be.
Yeah, has to be.
Yeah, we've got Paul in the chat comments saying Traore, so I think he's another good shout. As we've said with a few of these guys, it's basically a matter of if they keep themselves fit and get the majority of the season in, they could be pretty good players, which is basically the story of City. It's if we can keep everyone fit, we can actually be in for a pretty good season, but that feels like a pretty big if at the moment.
Every single prediction we've said can just start with, if he stays fit.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, absolutely. And we'll round things off then, our last prediction, and I'll start with you on this one, Logan. It's where you think we'll finish, what position, I suppose, and why.
Look, the confidence I've got is I genuinely do think, I know a lot of the boys have talked about just missing the playoffs as we've kind of gone. I do think that's probably more likely, but I'm going to feel confident and back us to get that 6th spot. And the reason is I just think we're trending in the right direction. I still think that there's a lot of, cracks to be ironed out. I don't think it's going to be easy. And I think that I wouldn't be surprised if the first half of the season is kind of slowish and we're sitting mid-table at Christmas. And then I expect us to come home with a wet sail.
Love it. Love the confidence. Dan, where do you think we'll be finishing up?
I would love to echo Logan's confidence, but I'm a little bit more cautious this time. But I think still pretty well. I think we'll improve on last season's finish because we'll have a whole season of Rosinia's football. But I think in that sort of 7th to 10th bracket.
Very nice. Will, where do you reckon we'll finish up?
I think when Rossinia coming in last season to the end of the season, I think the form said we finished, 8th from the moment he came into the end. So I'm thinking somewhere around 8th to 11th probably. So I'll say in the middle, I'll say 10th, 9th, 10th, I'll say.
Yeah, good shout. I've gone with 10th myself as well. I think a top 10 finish would be a good progress on last season, and hopefully set us up for a good season next year after that. Nathaniel, where do you have us finishing up?
Again, I'm trying to stay consistent with what I've said elsewhere. I said 11th last year, and then we were probably hindered getting that because of injuries. Hopefully we won't have that. So maybe I'll go 10th as well. I'm not confident enough to say we'll get in the playoffs. I know Gabe Sutton, the EFL expert, said we're 6th, so maybe we're just too close to it. Perhaps from the outside, it actually looks more promising than, because we were the ones who experienced the sort of disappointment of last year not being quite as good as we could have been. So, a push at the playoffs would be pretty good. But, ask me again, if we do sign a quality winger that's perhaps as good as a Serio or Christie, then we could definitely have a chance, because we do have a really good sort of, maybe not the entire squad, but we do have some really good quality players that maybe we're taking for granted, like Tufan, to be on the bench. That is pretty incredible for a championship club. So, but we haven't signed that quality winger yet, which I think is perhaps one of the positions we really need to improve. So I'll go 10th.
Yeah, I think on that, I think, we haven't got like many amazing individuals, but we've got a really good team, I think, which is what helps.
What do they call it? The core of the team, or the spine? The spine of the team is really good with, Greaves, Christie, Seri, Tufan, Traore. We've got a lot of good players, so if we can get the best out of them,
if they can stay fit.
Oh, precisely, yeah.
And where do you have us finishing?
I'm going to put us 9th. I just
Optimistic.
The thing is we can finish in the top 6. There's going to be 15 other clubs saying the same thing, and I think the thing that we'll miss out on is that we just can't score enough goals. And unless the start of the season proves otherwise, at the moment, going off last season and what we've seen in pre-season, I just think that we're not going to have the goals needed to get us in the top 6. When you look at the competition we've got and how strong this league is this season, it's a very tough league. And but being in the mix until like the last couple of games of the season, I'd be more than happy with. I think as long as we're in the discussion for the top 6 when it comes to crunch time, I think that's a successful season for me.
Well, hopefully that's the case. Look, we'll make a record of all our predictions, and I'm sure towards the end of the season, as they start coming true or missing, we can call each other out and see who did the best, who did the best with their predictions. But look, a massive thank you to all three of you from the To Hull and Back podcast for joining us for this very special episode, a week out from the season beginning. It's sort of right around the corner, much quicker than you sort of expect. A bit, kind of creeps up on you with just how short that preseason is. But yeah, massive thank you, Ant.
No worries. Thanks for having us on.
No problem, and massive thank you as well, Nathaniel.
My pleasure. Nice to be back on.
Yeah, no, and good to see you again, Will.
Thank you very much.
and of course our regulars as well, Logan, Dan. Thank you both for joining us for this one as well. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, lads, for jumping on. It's good to see your face, chat again. Looking forward to the Christmas special. I think we've got to get some revenge on the quiz.
Yeah. We'll have to try and get it sorted this year, won't we?
Yeah, we retained them last year because of weather.
You know how it is, yeah. And look, thank you as well, Logan.
Yeah, my pleasure, Alex. It's when they started talking about the Ashes, I was almost about to just disconnect my internet and jump off. But I'm looking forward to reuniting in December, and hopefully we're talking about promising things and sitting a lot higher up than some of us predicted.
Yeah, absolutely. And once again, massive thank you to everyone who's tuned in live. There's still 13 watching at the end of the episode. If you haven't already, hit like on the stream, subscribe to the channel as well. We'll be here each and every week to talk about City through hopefully a whole bunch of highs this season and very few injury woes. But otherwise, thanks everyone for listening in. And until next time, come on, City.